it was an amazing career, really. I was pleased that I did what I did.
How did you become a golf writer? Why did you want to become a golf writer?
Well, I actually started in the late 1960s. A friend of my brother had been a sports writer, and he said, "Do you want to come to Wimbledon?" He told me what to do. I covered the tennis at Wimbledon. I had a young son, and it was more practical to cover golf in this country than tennis, which was out of the country. And I interviewed a professional golfer that I knew and wrote an article about him called Rebel with a Cause. And I took it to Golf World and they accepted it and said they'd like more. I actually was around for Tony Jacklin winning the Open Championship in 1969. I was put up to join the Golf Writers in 1970. They didn't like the idea and they said, "What happens if you get pregnant?" So I said, "Well, if it's not one of your guys, will it matter?" I still wasn't allowed to be a member of the Golf Writers, but I went on working. And I went to a tournament one day up north. The chap on the door said, "Where's your badge?" Because the Golf Writers all had badges. So I said, "Well, I'm female and I don't get a badge." So he took a cardboard facsimile out of his pocket and he said, "Look, love," he said, "this is what you're supposed to have." So I said, "I know, but they won't give me a badge." So he said, "Here, love, have this one." So for 10 years, I went round with a cardboard facsimile of the Golf Writers badge to get into places. And after 10 years, I was allowed to join the Golf Writers. And then I asked to join the Press Golfing Society, and they said, "Why would you want to join?" So I said, "Well, I'm a member of the press and I play golf." And he said, "Well, we don't play at courses where ladies can play." So I said, "Where would that be?" And he hummed and hawed. And then eventually he said, "Well, we don't give ladies prizes." So I said, "Well, what do you give?" I said, "Balls." So for 7 years they kept me out. This was how I went around being a golf writer. I joined the Daily Telegraph and I had a very good sports editor there. Then when he retired, the next sports editor actually thought women shouldn't write sport. So I went to The Guardian, had a very good sports editor again. When he got put to another part of the paper, the next sports editor also wasn't keen on women writing sport. So I went to The Independent, and then I got offered a job on the Mail on Sunday, and I ended up at the Mail on Sunday. Covering golf in the early days, if ever they went to a male club, I wasn't allowed in. And there was a lot of discrimination, but I was able to write and I was able to make a career. You had to battle through if you were a woman, there was no doubt about it. And I enjoyed doing it, and so I thought it was worthwhile trying to change things.
How did it make you feel, the fact that you just kept getting pushed back? Did it ever make you feel like you wanted to stop?
Well, it was definitely difficult, but I thought that somebody had to break down the barriers, and I just thought it was worthwhile carrying on because maybe I could make some changes. And actually I became a member of the Press Golfing Society. I was their first woman captain. And since that, women have joined, other women have been captain. The golf writers, I think, got more used to a woman being around, and 2 golf writers had wives who became golf writers. Having said that, we were all golf writing at the time, and I think that was good as well, because it was a change. I actually got bodily evicted from the R&A clubhouse during the 1990 Open Championship, and I'd been told that I was allowed to go in the locker room, as were my fellow male golf writers, And I went down to the locker room and the attendant said, "You can't come in here." And I said, "Well, yes, I've got permission." And there was a member standing there and he told the attendant to get me out. And he took me by the back of my elbows. He marched me up the stairs and out of the clubhouse. Well, I was working for the Mail on Sunday at the time, and they gave it a whole page. I wrote a whole page about it. Then I was taken by the National Union of Journalists to a barrister. She said I could sue the RNA and I would win, and she said it would go to appeal and I would win. And that's because you're a member of the public, and if a male goes in, then a female goes in. I didn't want to sue them, and I knew Michael Benelek, who was the secretary of the RNA. I had a 2-year discussion with him, and 2 years later he escorted me into the locker room at Muirfield at the Open Championship. So again, you know, I'd changed something.
So when you were making a name for yourself within the golf writing industry, it was mainly men's golf that you covered. Did you ever work on anything LPGA?
Yes, I did. In 1973, I think it was, LPGA from America came to a tournament at Sunningdale, and I went to that tournament, and I have to say I was somewhat intimidated because there were all these women professional golfers whom I didn't know. But I watched the tournament and I met some of them, and it was incredibly impressive. And after that, I decided that I would go to America and cover some of the LPGA tournaments. And it was a real education meeting these women who were playing. And I decided to write a book about them. And I wrote a book about the LPGA and its history. And I interviewed about 70 women all over the country, and then I put 50 of them in the book, and they were very good. I mean, I had one who refused to be interviewed, which I thought was quite good actually, because another woman professional I knew talked about her. It's amazing what those women achieved. So I saw what those women had achieved themselves. They started in 1949.
Do you think that inspired you to be part of something which pushed to get professional golf in this continent established?
Oh, definitely. Vivien Saunders actually had gone and played on the LPGA tour in America, and I thought that was great. And I thought that if the women over there could make a go of it, then there must be women here who could also make a go of it, and there could be a professional tour.
Even though there was proof that women's professional golf did actually work, you didn't have a lot of happy people, did you, over here when you were trying to start professional golf? There was a lot of people who didn't like what you were trying to do.
That's right. I mean, Vivien Saunders got hold of me because she was having trouble with the PGA. And she said, could I help? Because she really wasn't getting anywhere with them. And I said, well, I'll go up to the PGA and you stay here and you do other things and we'll, you know, combine in what we do. And I went up to the PGA and it was quite funny, really. I mean, they weren't at all receptive to what we wanted to do, but I explained that, you know, that this was what we had decided to do, and we were going to get a sponsor, and we wanted to set it up, and we thought that enough women would turn professional in order to have a tour. And I went up and down to them. Then we had to do other things in terms of getting sponsors, in terms of launching the whole idea, and in terms of getting women to play. Vivien and I reckon did it together. She's an amazing woman. I mean, the fact she went to America and played, she practiced law, she'd been to university. She was an amazing, achieving woman.
Before she reached out to you, were you aware of what Vivien was trying to do over here?
No. But the other thing is, because I was writing golf, I was able to write about it. Once, you know, we got it off the ground, I could write about it. Yeah. And so I think that was an advantage.
What was the pinnacle of why you wanted to be involved, and what did you think you could bring to the table?
Well, I suppose I thought that women could do anything they wanted to do if they wanted it enough. And I'd wanted to be a golf writer, and I'd managed to survive as a golf writer. and the LPGA had managed to survive with their tour and were really well-known, prominent people. And I couldn't see why you couldn't get a tour off the ground here and allow women to have that opportunity. When you start, it's like a family. There's no doubt about it, because you start with a few people. And it was the same in America. They were a family, they all travelled together, and that happened here.
How difficult were the conversations you had with people? Was there ever a point you thought, this isn't going to work?
No, I think the conversations were definitely difficult. And I don't think people were that encouraging either. I think Vivien and I had enough belief in what we were doing. I mean, the fact that we found women who wanted to turn professional and were happy to do that also was a big boost, and I think, you know, good for them that they did. And then we got Carlsberg to come with 12 tournaments for a year. Well, that was fantastic. And I think the women themselves didn't know what they were going into, but they were very happy to go. And I think that was courageous of them.
Was there anybody within the PGA that was positive about what you were trying to do, or was it all negative?
I don't remember anyone being positive, but I may be mistaken.
So it was you and Vivien pushing for this. Was there any other people?
There was a professional golfer called Tony Martin who was involved, and he was keen about it. I asked Peter Allis to be at the launch of it because he got publicity, I should say. And Barry Edwards was very keen when he came along, and I would have to think that Vivien found Barry Edwards.
So you're working in the press and this is happening. Was anybody covering this?
I think people didn't take any interest until the launch, and there were 12 tournaments and the women were going to play. But I don't think anybody was interested before that, because they probably thought it wouldn't get off the ground anyway.
Whilst this is happening, you're also doing your full-time job. You're covering other stories. Are you just working in golf at this point?
Yeah, I covered men's golf.
So you're working men's golf, but you're also doing this on the side?
Yes.
So when it came to Carlsberg had agreed with yourself and Vivien, the 12 tournaments, what then happened? Like, what was your role?
Well, so far as I remember, if anything needed doing, you know, Vivien and I got together, and as I say, I did some of it, she did some of it. We arranged the launch, and obviously we were all at the launch. I started covering some of the tournaments, the women's tournaments, but I probably continued at the same time on the men's tour, actually.
How difficult was it to balance it, working in the men's game and then also working within this?
I think you cope with what you're faced with and what you want to cope with. I've always thought if you want to do something and you really want to do it, you get on with it. And I think that's what I did. I had to put up ideas to people all the time, you know, to cover whatever I wanted to cover, and I had to have them accepted. But that's what I got used to doing.
So you were helping to get this off the ground with Vivien. Was your job easier at that point when you were helping to get it going, or was it easier once it had all been established and you were just covering the tournaments?
It wasn't a matter of easier, it was a matter of dealing with what you had to deal with at the time. And I'd always been used to that, you know. I mean, you're talking about over 10 years of my having been a golf writer before this was launched. That 10 years hadn't been, you know, easy going, but I wanted to do it. I wanted to prove that, you know, a woman could do it. And so when I got to getting the WPGA off the ground, it was just another thing that I was faced with that I wanted to do.
Where would you rank your first season with the WPGA in your career? Was it a brilliant first year?
Yes, I mean, I think it was. I think the fact that, you know, we'd made it happen, the fact that these women turned professional, the fact that they had 12 tournaments was pretty miraculous, really. And I thought that it could only improve, actually. and more women did turn professional, so that it became acknowledged that it was a women's tour.
Did everybody want to improve and for the tour to grow at a really rapid pace? Or was everyone just happy to just go around and play and to see how it went?
No, I think it was a matter of both things, because I think people were very happy that they could play professional golf, but I think there was always a feeling that we could do more and we could get more sponsors, and more sponsors did come in. And I think the women both combined to enjoy it and to improve it.
So the people that weren't supportive, did they quickly change their tune once you got it off the ground?
Yes, I think once they saw that it was an up-and-going concern and that it was going well, I think they did support it.
All of a sudden there's professional golf in the continent. How good a feeling was that?
Yeah, well, I think it was great, and I think that I probably interviewed the women at the time, and they were very positive, and I think that that gave you good feedback as well. I think what happened with myself was that I then went over to America and actually started covering the LPGA events. A lot of the older women weren't on the tour anymore, and they were people I wanted to interview, and probably wasn't as involved over here as I had been, either with the men or with the women, although I still covered all of them.
So what year was it that you went back over to the LPGA?
In the 1980s.
1980. So Alison Shared was there. That must have been quite nice for you, someone that you'd obviously known from the WPGA.
Well, yes, but I'd met the women before, the American women. They weren't hostile at all, but they were wary. I was a golf writer, and they were wary. Since I got to know some of them pretty well, I became more acceptable. And they knew that I was a friend of somebody, and so somebody else would say, well, you know, if she knows her, that's okay.
What was the camaraderie like between you and the players?
I was a golf writer and they were professional golfers, and the professional golfers did what they did amongst themselves. I mean, I was very friendly with them, but that doesn't mean to say I travelled with them or anything else. I was writing about them, I'd helped launch the tour, but I was different, you know. You're not one of the pro golfers, that's very different.
How long did it take for it to grow and for domestic papers to want to cover it?
The major events were probably covered. I wouldn't say there was instant coverage of the women. There was Louine Mayer, Patricia Davies, and there was another woman as well, and they went and covered events. I covered some. I wouldn't say the male golf writers covered much at all, actually. I don't remember, but I would say they went if there was if it was the Open, then they'd cover it, the Women's Open. But I don't think there was very wide coverage otherwise.
Was there any standout moment, I don't know, a big event which happened, like I know you just mentioned, like the Open?
Well, the standout moment was Laura Davies. When Laura Davies came on tour, she was unbelievable. And I think that was when people started to cover women's events more because of Laura. And in America, there'd been a woman called Babe Diedrichson, and she had been the draw for the tour there in the early years. She died about 6 years after it started, but she was definitely the draw in America, and Laura Davies was here.
What was it like to cover golf when Laura Davies first started?
You know, I saw her in Paris, outside Paris at a tournament, and I saw the first shot I saw her hit was a 5-iron, and I just looked at this 5-iron and I said, wow, I can't believe it. And I, went on following her, and it was so extraordinary, this woman playing golf, who was just somehow in another league almost.
So the first tournament in mainland Europe was in 1983. What was it which made the tour want to expand into mainland Europe?
I don't know. I think actually there were other golfers here. Mickey Walker was a big name. She didn't join in the beginning, but when she joined, I think that helped. Other golfers who coming from different countries, I think meant that they had exposure in their countries, and therefore in those countries, they would be able to set up tournaments there. And I think it was because there were people from Spain, Italy, and France that there were tournaments there. I think that's what allowed it to happen. And they were actually quite big names themselves in their own countries, and I think that helped.
Going to these places, did that help grow the game, and did you find that more media wanted to cover it and ultimately get more publicity?
Yeah, I think it was definitely good for the game. I mean, the men's tour didn't move into Europe until the 1970s, and that made a big difference to the men's tour. And I think similarly, it made a big difference to the women's tour that they were able to do that as well.
Was everybody that was part of the WPGA welcoming of moving across to Europe?
Oh yes, I think they realised that it was good for them and it would enlarge the tour itself.
When was it that you retired from covering golf?
From covering golf?
Yeah.
About 2002 maybe.
And what was it like then?
Yeah, it was very different in terms of men's golf. They were beginning to get managers, and it was, when I joined, I mean, you knew the professionals by name, they knew you. If you wanted an interview, you went up to them and asked them for it. You had lunch with them. I mean, it was interesting. Tom Watson was the only person who came to find me when I'd asked him for an interview. Jack Nicklaus was fine sometimes. When he saw me in the locker room, he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm working." And he said, "You're a woman." And I said, "Well, I noticed." And I don't think he was very pleased I was in the locker room. And Lee Trevino, I once had a row with, and the next time he saw me, we were still great friends, Seve Ballesteros was my hero. I thought he was absolutely fantastic. He wasn't easy, but he was delightful. Yeah, Gary Player was great, and I had a good relationship with him. You'd ask Arnold Palmer for an interview, and he'd say, "Yes, I'll see you here at whatever time," and he'd give you, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever you needed. And I think, on the women's tour, I got to know these women, and that actually was good for me because that gave me confidence that these women had achieved so much, and I think that made me feel that I could. You knew everybody personally, and you didn't have to deal with a manager to find out whether you could have an interview. It was a much friendlier place, I consider, with the press and the players. And when we got to 2002, I think it was pretty different.
What do you think can be done to bridge that gap between the men's and the women's game?
I don't think you ever will bridge that gap. I think men's sport generally is always going to be more popular, and the reason it's going to be more popular is because men are so much stronger than women. And if you see a man hit a ball 350 yards, you go, my goodness. And I think that makes a huge difference. I think you've got to watch women's sport and have a different mentality towards watching women's sport. And when you do, and when you accept that, it's fine. But a lot of people don't want to accept it. It's always tough to have to promote something that some people don't want to support. You don't get much TV coverage with women in sport, really.
What do you think of women's golf right now?
I think it's made huge strides. I think it's very much more acceptable than it was. I think the women have learned how to be far more professional. I mean, when they went in at the beginning, what did they know about professional golf? Nothing. And they were great, but you have to learn what you do, how you present yourself, and what you are. I think it's ridiculous when they criticize women for promoting themselves, how they dress, how they look, or whatever. Men in every sport do exactly the same, but people don't seem to realize it. I mean, footballers, you should see them off the football pitch and what they're wearing and they're promoting and doing. It's just the same as the women are doing, but people don't recognize that, you know.
Did you ever think that the WPGA, now the LET, would become what it is today?
No, I don't think you had any idea at the beginning what it would become. You know, you just hoped.
Was there any doubt in your mind that it would still be around today?
No, I think having seen the LPGA, that had shown me that you could survive and do well.
What advice would you give to people out there that are looking to start something off?
I think you should definitely try to succeed. That's what life's about. And if you fail, too bad, you know, we all fail. If you're determined enough and if your idea is good enough, you can succeed.
Do you consider yourself a pioneer in the women's game?
Definitely. I was known as a golfing suffragette, and there's a photo of me somewhere as a golfing suffragette.
What was it like to cover golf in this continent?
I think it was quite difficult in a way to get it accepted. You didn't get much space. The space you'd get covering women's golf would be minimal compared to what men were getting. But I mean, it was good to get it covered, is the answer. And if you could do interviews and get those in golf magazines, then that was also good. If you put up an idea for covering a tournament, they'd either say yes or no. As I say, I mean, I was covering men's golf anyway, so probably more of the time I was covering men's golf than I was women's golf.
What are your favourite memories from your time on the WPGA?
Meeting the women themselves was probably outstanding. To know that there were women turning professional. I mean, meeting people, you know, like Chris Lanford or Alison or Mickey Walker or, you know, all these people was definitely a highlight. To know that they were brave enough to take it on and do what they were doing. I mean, Mickey had played in America. The launch obviously was satisfying that you'd got there and you'd done it and it happened. And I think just seeing them playing, knowing that they were professional golfers and they were on the tour and we'd made that happen.
If you look back on it now, is it all good memories?
No, I would say not. Nothing probably is all good memories. It doesn't matter what you do. But on the whole, I would say it's good memories, yes. All the time I spent as a golf writer, on the whole, is good memories, and the battles you fought, but that was part of it.
If you could imagine how you would like to see women's game in this continent, what do you see?
Well, you see it being supported by sponsorship. You hope that it has coverage. You hope that somebody comes along who's a big name and that pulls in more coverage. And you hope that the women themselves promote it as much as they can. In America, there were two sisters, the Bauer sisters, and they, at the beginning, they went around the country doing golf clinics, and it promoted the tour. And I think, you know, if you get people doing that here, it would be great.
How do you view your career in golf?
I actually view it with much affection. I really enjoyed the people I was working with. I really enjoyed the professionals that I knew and interviewed. I really enjoyed going around in the tournaments and seeing different parts of the world. I'm pleased that I had the battles I had and got through them. I'm still in touch with a lot of people that I knew in America and here. And it's been an education, and it's been rewarding and enjoyable.